by many countries, according to India, that remained inconclusive. Because some countries believed, and some entities believed, that one country's terrorist is another country's freedom fighter. But I don't think that held back the fight against terrorism. What is holding back a genuine global response to terror is the fact that each one of us, or rather many countries in the world, there are 193 member states in the UN, the South Sudan being the latest 193rd. Many countries believe that this is somebody else's problem. And each group, I've had a long association in different places, London, in New York, on the Security Council, elsewhere in Sri Lanka. If you were asking a question, it seems a very relevant question, but it's a very simplistic and very difficult to answer question. What do different groups want? General Hussain and I have dealt with some groups, I know what they want. If you were to ask the people I used to deal with it as a young first secretary or a councillor in Sri Lanka, they wanted Elam. If you ask them, where is Elam going to come? Because if you look at, and I'm saying something in a lighter vein, so if somebody quotes me, I have a disclaimer right up front. I mean, Sri Lanka it's not a country with a lot of landmass. So when you ask them, where is Elam going to be? Say Elam is going to be some part of the north and a little bit part of the east. So you want to slice it away and that becomes Elam. He said, is that sustainable? Let's say even hypothetically as an argument, is that workable? There are some other stans which are being talked about there. Some part of that stan is in the figment of somebody's imagination. Other part will come through some part of Canada, or it will come. It's a ridiculous situation. Somebody gets up and blows up an Air India plane. I'm giving you a real life example. It's a fact. And you refuse to extradite the people who are responsible for that act of terrorism. So, every group can have its own different. If you ask Mr. Masood Azhar, right, that's his name? Yeah. What is your big? I don't care what his objective is. I don't care what his objective is. But if Masood Azhar is given sustenance by, first they say he's disappeared, they can't find him, then they find him, then they say he's changed his name, etc. I mean, there should be zero tolerance on this. And I think after a while the narrative is taken to the point where that zero tolerance comes, people say enough is enough, let's come down with a sledgehammer. But meanwhile that guy is, is like jelly, he's changed shape, etc. I wouldn't worry about too much, and I wouldn't look for the nuances, Kapilji, in terms of what different people want. Because if you get involved in that discussion, then you'll say, yaar, ye theek hai, iski demand to shari legitimate, like nothing doing. Today, if the international society is based on the rule of law and public order, no one should have the freedom to pick up a stone and hurl it at someone. I'm looking at my friend here, Nityaraj. I mean, look at this. Look at the difference there in Kashmir. Today the hotels are booked. I was civil aviation minister. My God, I look at the number of flights there, chock-a-block full. Same place, same people. You have to step in and ensure that the space available for those individual terror entities is slowly circumscribed and then completely done away. That is when you win the fight. And I wouldn't worry about what their end game is. I know what my end game is. For civilized, open society, the end game is survival. And we run large, open, democratic systems, open space. Anybody wants to come and do it, tries to get away with it. In the heart of a city, you can come and say, you can take out, unleash physical violence. The use of violence against civilians, no matter what the cause. I think Lakshmi was pointing out the formulation in the Summit of the Future document with the Prime Minister's language. That is absolutely correct. There should be no space for that. Now I can say that that's my view, and I think everybody agree with me, that's a view. But then you've got to get your state systems prepared to ensure that those guys don't get more freedom. And the countries which have been giving them freedom, I'm telling you, no matter what they say openly, etc., they are beginning to realize that this viper which you are rearing in your backyard is going to come and bite you as well.
Thank you, sir.
Before we have more questions, I would just like to recall an incident. Honorable Minister Puri, thank you very much for your most insightful and encouraging remarks. I mean, this is a great motivation for young scholars like me, if you have such a high appreciation for my work. So this happened back in the year 2002. I was in my second year undergrad at St. Stephen's College, and we had a society called Commonwealth Society of India, and it was headed by Professor Vinod Chaudhary. He used to teach economics at St. Stephen's College. And back in those days, they organized one exchange visit to UK. Honorable Minister Puri was posted there in UK then, and they organized one little discussion for our young students to a roundtable discussion. We went there, and I distinctly remember, there was one young scholar. She was an exchange student from US, and she asked a little obnoxious question regarding the human rights situation and all. And sir gave a very strong and a befitting reply to her. So that actually was the beginning of my career in international relations and foreign policy.
Vinod Chaudhary was not only he was a lecturer in economics in St. Stephen's College later, but he was part of our debating circuit. So Vinod and his sister, who subsequently joined the IAS, Neeta Chaudhary, no, it's correct, am I maybe making sense? Vinod was a very articulate person, very, very perceptive, and he chose a world in academics. So I remember him with great affection. So he contacted me when I was Deputy High Commissioner in London, and I readily agreed to this interactive session. So there's one, but let me just, on your book, I was very thrilled. I mean, a lot of people, by the way, just to set the record, a lot of people ask me, how come you don't accept invitations? So I said, but this is something special. If an Indian scholar has actually worked on it and produced a first-class book, people don't say कि ये भी होना चाहिए, don't fall for that. You know, I've never come across any successful author who was not told कि यार ये भी angle देख लेना, वो बोला अगली बारी देख लेंगे. That's a good one. But this deserves to be applauded. It deserves to be saying, because you're studying, you're taking a tough subject. You know, when I wrote Perilous Intervention, I was told by all my friends, well, I have a chapter on Sri Lanka and that. I don't know if I've been able to write it after I became a minister. But I was told by everyone whom I interacted with me that, you know, this is such a strong book that you won't have any friends left in the United States. You know what I said? I said, that's not the thought that crossed my mind when I wrote the book. So happened that just before the book came out, the Obama administration changed its official stance on what happened in Libya and Syria. In Libya, I used to have Susan Rice, who was my counterpart in the Security Council, the American ambassador, tell me, you don't know, Hardeep, you don't know the yearning for democracy on Arab streets. So I said, I know it as much as you know it. And then, you know, they appointed a person as ambassador to Libya. Benghazi, he was there. My friend has been in Libya, he'll remind me of the name. So at night, there were a lot of shouting crowds. They thought the crowd had come to welcome the newly appointed ambassador. Naam kya tha uska yaar? Chris. Oh, they came to lynch him. This is terrorism, yaar. What are we discussing? Because I think her analysis that Arab Street was yearning for this thing was correct, but there were other people also involved in there. And what happened after that is history. So, I mean, you know, when Perilous Intervention got published at that stage, by that time American policy had changed. And by the way, if you want to ever look at the literature on the use of force, it's cited as a textbook now. I took up Libya, I took up Syria. Libya because there was a Security Council resolution supporting the use of force. Syria, we tried our best in the Security Council, 2 permanent members didn't allow it to take place. I got chapters on Crimea, I have Crimea, and unthinkable today. So then I have a chapter on Sri Lanka and said this was our perilous intervention. Agree or don't agree, I mean that people also thought we were going to make peace there. We wanted to make peace. But you know what you ended up doing? So That world of terror requires to be studied much more. I'm glad today at least it's a mainstream subject in Indian academics. But at those days, I mean, look at the literature, there wasn't hardly any literature. So when something like this comes along, I think it's very well done. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If we can take 2 more questions, 3 more questions before we move on to
my friend Aditya Rajkumar.
Mr. Puri, as a former senior diplomat representing India, especially in the United Kingdom, I want to ask you about try to be a little louder. Minister Puri, thank you very much. My question is, as a former senior diplomat representing India, especially in the UK, you know about an Indian diplomat 40 years ago, Ravindra Matre, who was killed. And my question is about the security of the Indian diplomats who represent India, especially in countries where there have been attacks on Indian missions, etc. Now, for the last 24 to 48 hours, we've seen an Indian diplomat, a senior Indian diplomat, Sanjay Kumar Verma. His videos are going viral on some groups, with his photograph being pumped with bullets. And now this particular country calls for his expulsion. But my overall question is not regarding this particular Canada incident, but about the security of the diplomats and terrorism. How does one ensure that, as India being the leading voice of terrorism and the Western countries preaching us about rules-based order and democracy?
No. First of all, the security of any representative should be a matter of concern for all governments. And I speak here in my personal capacity. Yes, I know the Mhatre case. I've served in that country, in the aftermath of that. I have also witnessed other threats to the physical threats to people who represent India. I've been at the receiving end of some of those threats, so I know that, I fully comprehend that. I think it is incomprehensible that in the name of freedom of expression, etc., you allow the photograph, whether on social media or etc., portrait of a head of mission and with different people firing plastic, whatever bullets, etc. Look, it's a symbology. And I can tell you, I'm not because I'm a member of this team. Our responses on all these things have been exemplary. And I think they will realize when we start calibrating our response. I read the statement of the Ministry of External Affairs and it filled me with pride. They were called a spade. And this process, I don't want to comment on it because the MES statement speaks for itself. But listen, this happens everywhere. It can happen to anyone. So let's be very, very careful. If you allow a person who is in the discharge of his duties to become a subject for this thing, I've seen my colleagues in different places being attacked in gurudwaras, etc. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on. And then we speak about the rule of law.
Namaskar, sir. I am Anupam. Sir, since ages we are observing that especially US always try to intervene in terrorism and they fund terrorists. Even in present context we have seen in Bangladesh. Sir, how you see it? It will hinder the India's vision of development and.
Anupaji, I want to skirt that question. Insofar as the US position on terrorism is concerned, I think it's a pretty clear position. On other issues, I think we can have a discussion, and I don't want to leave Bangladesh out of it because I don't think it fits into that classical discussion. I mean, and I think if Jaishankar ji comes here tomorrow or whenever you get him in another platform, I mean, that's a question best addressed there. all I can say is that the zero tolerance norm which the international community or the multilateral world has adopted should be adhered to, and it should be adhered to by all countries. And that post 9/11, what is absolutely clear, that it can't be that terrorism is your problem and not my problem. Yeah, I think this is the paragraph I decided not to use any papers. This is that India has reason to be satisfied with the strong commitment, within quotes, to pursue a future free from terrorism and to combat it and violent extremism conducive to terrorism, unquote, in every way and at all levels, including through revitalizing the Convention Against Terrorism, which I was referring to. The PPF condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, committed by whomever, wherever, whenever. All terrorist acts are criminal acts and unjustifiable, regardless of motivation or how their perpetrators may seek to justify. This is the crux of it. All terrorist acts, in all its forms and manifestations, committed by whoever, it doesn't matter whether it's being committed by X or Y. These are all criminal acts, unjustifiable, and whoever may be the perpetrator needs to be condemned. I think this is also language from the PPF, the Summit of the Futures also. This is the crux of it. Thank you.
So, yes, sir. This way, sir. Yeah. So, my name is Rakesh Sharma, sir. My question refers to your repeated references of your being chairman of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, is also his president of the Security Council. But this is an era of 32 odd wars are on in the world, an era of conflict management by authoritarianism. Jiski lati uski bhais. There is no rule of law left. There is no value of the Security Council at all, sir. Then, or any one of the other associations, ECOMOC or ECOWA, or OSCE or whoever. So where is the world moving to, sir? Who is responsible for peace in this world at all?
No, sir, I agree with you completely. That's why I said we are dealing with a dysfunctional Security Council. Let me just repeat for the sake of clarity that the Security Council is the only designated agency which under international law has the authority to make a determination of what constitutes a threat to peace and security. That's the only agency. Individually you can't. I mean, you can decide if you're commanding a force, you can decide you can make war against X or Y or Z. That's a different issue. But that will be a unilateral act. Now, if anyone is threatened, he or she or whatever country, she can come to the Security Council and say, I am being threatened, and the Security Council make a determination whether there is a threat to international peace and security. If it's you fighting your neighbor because of the apples grown in your backyard are not being evenly shared, that's not a Security Council. We're talking about international peace and security. But having made that determination, the real power of the Security Council lies in the fact that they will be able to then authorize, it's called all means necessary, that's a language within quote, which means authorize countermeasures, that is use of force. In Libya, we authorized counterforce because there was a problem coming at the state. In Syria, we couldn't because the permanent members were. But since the Libya and Syria period, Security Council is plagued, it's paralyzed. So when you tell me that there are 32 conflicts going on, I agree with you. There may be more you and I may not be aware of. And today the threats to peace and security are not just all in terms of 155mm howitzer being fired across the borders. The threats to international peace and security in that definition can come from paralyzing through cyber attacks. It can come through measures to undermine or completely paralyze energy installation. A lot of things can happen. But nobody bothers to go to the Security Council. So I agree with you. In fact, you've been polite. I mean, when I'm not on this side of the dais, I use much stronger language. these guys turn around and give us a lecture on the rule of law. Unbelievable. Today it's a dysfunctional multilateral order, and you said that jiski lathi uski bhans, you're absolutely correct, yeah. But that is what gives me, as somebody who spent 39 years in the Foreign Service, 6 years in the world of, I was a senior vice president of the International Peace Institute, Secretary General of the Independent Commission on Multilateralism, appointed by the UN. I've done all those things. And now 8th year as a minister. But what gives me confidence that today's India stands up. Somebody acts funny with me, I tell them, hey, listen guy, hey, you've got domestic political compulsions because you have a bunch of guys there who affect your electoral arithmetic or the prospects of it, and you take a stand and come be my guest, we'll deal with you. So I agree with you. But again, as I said, the Indian position on conflict is a very well considered position, traditionally. But I think the Prime Minister has articulated it more effectively. He's told all sides to the conflict, this is a time for peace, not for war. You need to use the instrument of diplomacy. So that part is being done more aggressively, and I think it's also sinking in somewhere. I'm not saying that's the total distinct, because if you are bent on, and some conflicts become what I call frozen conflicts. There you have to deal with them separately, and then they get eclipsed by other arenas where conflict is arising. But my expectation in all this is, reform of the Council will not take place, or the UN will not take place tomorrow, not till the world is facing these conflicts. But sooner rather than later, you will have to realize that the post-1945 security, the global architecture was a flawed one, because it was based on the dictum, to the victor belong the spoils. All the guys who so-called won the Second World War were sitting as permanent members. But they're no longer part of that. There were other countries which did very well. Who are the world's third, fourth and fifth largest economies? Japan, Germany and India. And they're not on the council. Forget about anything else. It's the economic absurdity also. When tomorrow there is a problem somewhere in terms of, a tsunami, who does the heavy lifting? Our, rescue and rehabilitation effort becomes operational. So the world is like that. I expect better sense to prevail, and that all the guys who can make a difference to the evolution of the global turbulence, to calm it, slowly reach a position of cessation of hostilities, then wind back, etc. And after that, you'll have to look at multilateral institutions. Because none of them, this was in 1945, you wanted to create a post-Second World War order. But in that 7 decades plus, a lot of things have happened. But it's a very different world today.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Shri Tajendra Khanna, former Lieutenant Governor of New Delhi.
Question already.
You just raised the issue of terrorism affecting other areas, and you cited the example of energy installations. You cited the example of energy installations. And essentially how terrorism is used not just against nations, but also for economic agendas. I understand that your ministry is contemplating deep sea oil exploration in the Andamans. Something which we have been aware of for at least 50, 60 years, but not been able to do. Something almost akin to state-sponsored, or not even state-sponsored terrorism, but state intimidation, which has kept us from accessing that oil for 50 years. Since Sir John, I forget his full name, the MI6 in 1977 passed on that intimidating message to Tea and Gaul. Since then, we've capped any effort which first began with the lesser depths. I understand that you are now contemplating a greater depths in the Andamans. Are we also contemplating security provisions which will secure that from terrorist attacks? Because that was the official reason cited.
I'm not aware of any intimidation by any MI6 or person to Mr. Call or anyone. I'm not familiar with it, but I'll tell you something. My understanding is that what has held back offshore deep sea is something more fundamental. Very few countries have that, or very few companies have that expertise to do that, number one. Number two, you can't do it without spending a lot of money. Number three, the person who is willing to make that investment, there are only 4 or 5 major oil companies in the world which are into this business, and there are some companies here. You need to spend a lot of money to do it. Now, if you look at the major finds in the world, they must have dug 16 wells and almost gave up till somebody said, yeah, next 17th we try kar lo, and then they stuck oil. In our case, the problem was more serious. We have something like 3.5 million square kilometers of sedimentary basin, and we were not exploring more than 6% of that. So recently, I think last year, the Prime Minister cleared 1 million out of those 3.5 million square kilometers for prospecting. Earlier it was to be no-go area. Now, in the 9th round of OALP, that open acreage licensing policy, which we've just announced, 38% of the bids which have come are in that no-go area. So earlier there was neglect, criminal neglect. I don't think it was intimidation by anyone. Not policy. Yeah,
the intervention of the 7th Fleet, the territorial waters, the implications on that by the partition of Pakistan.
But uske baad, if I were to agree with you, then I'm giving a clean chit to the government which came after that. Arey bhai, they were not interested, yaar. They were not interested in the sense there was neglect bordering on criminal neglect. So now we are correcting that. We have 9th round where we've got 38% of the bids in there. The 10th round of open acreage licensing policy, which we've gone to the cabinet, got an approval, which is now before where at the end of the day, we have got to change mindset also. We tell the exploration companies, come and be with us. I went to Brazil recently and told Petrobras has one unique capacity, that they have capacity for offshore deep sea off the Sao Paulo basin. And he said, you come and help us in the seismic and other work. We will incentivize you. You don't make any commitment on investment. You don't even need to spend any money. We will spend the money. If we strike oil, you will have the right to first refusal. So it's a change mindset. हमारी तरफ से भी अब उसका क्या कारण था? Were we acting in response of our own thing when somebody else was controlling? I can spend an entire afternoon giving you my conspiracy theories.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Shri Rajendra Khanna, former Lieutenant Governor of New Delhi, to kindly deliver his